Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Kels Dayton. This is RoundballDaily.com, and just wanted to give a couple quick thoughts on the NCAA Tournament. Obviously, the Sweet 16 now over, moving into the Elite Eight, and a couple things I saw. That Kansas State game against Kentucky. Obviously, the referees completely took over that game. The officials were all over it. It was ridiculous. Too many fouls called, way too many fouls called. It felt like there was a foul every 5 seconds of stoppage in play. It was completely ridiculous. Kentucky went to the line, I think, way too much. Guy at the end of the game with Kansas State was just putting his arms up like this, barely touched him, sent him to the foul line. Kentucky got called for a lot of ridiculous fouls as well. And I think ultimately it did help Kansas State in that game because they wanted to stop the game, make it more of a choppy game flow. Kind of a Kentucky wanted to get out and run. Kansas State likes to play defense. They like to keep the game low scoring and in a half-court type situation. So I think it kind of did benefit Kansas State, but I think some of the calls were kind of ridiculous against the Wildcats as well, the Kansas State Wildcats. But Kansas State did a great job in that game. I thought when you take a look at it, they were just a little bit older. They also have a young team. Everybody talks about how Kentucky's so young. Kansas State has a young team too. A lot of sophomores on that team. Barry Brown is just a junior. You take a look at Dean Wade, who didn't even play that much. People calling him Dean Wade. I thought people were saying D Wade. I was like, what's going on here? But Kansas State, yeah, they did a great job. And I think when you look at them, they might be the luckiest team that we've ever seen make it to the Elite Eight, and that's no knock against them. Obviously, when you have a historic upset in the second round, in the first round actually, with UMBC beating Virginia, you're going to have a second round team in Kansas State that's going to get to be the luckiest team of all time because they're going to be moving on, not having to play the 1 seed, get to play that 16, so you're almost automatically in the Sweet 16 there, and they took care of business against UMBC. Didn't score a lot of points, but won the game, did what they had to do. They had the better athletes. UMBC played a great game, played defensively really well, but Kansas State took away Jarius Lyles. And that was the difference in the game, really, because Virginia couldn't do that at all. Lyles went off against them. They really had a terrible motivation or game plan coming into it. You could tell that UMBC really knew what they were going to do and executed well. And Virginia, once they got behind, of course, a team like that could not come back, and it just looked like they really couldn't fight back in that game. And weren't prepared for the moment because you take a look at all the games they played in the ACC, went 31-2 this year in the ACC, which is ridiculous. But I think the fact that they just weren't prepared for that game, I think the fact that they knew that, trailing by 10, double digits late in the game, they knew they weren't going to be able to come back, and they're not a team that can score a lot quickly. So I think that was a problem for them. And about the 10-minute mark, you kind of knew it was over. But anyway, so UMBC gets on in that game. They move on to the second round. Kansas State beats them. I think it might have been the first time ever for sure that a 9 seed was wearing the home jerseys in the second round. And then get to the Sweet 16 and face Kentucky. Obviously, Buffalo beating Arizona in the first round I think helped because Arizona ran through the Pac-12 tournament, won the championship, and moved on with a lot of momentum heading into the NCAA tournament. Kentucky beat, obviously, Buffalo in the second round. Buffalo just housed Arizona, absolutely destroyed them. Was not expecting that at all. And the way Buffalo came out, they have a lot of high major transfers for a mid-major program. And so the Buffalo's head coach, Nate Oates, said that he was not surprised that they won that game, that they thought that they were the better team going in, which respect to him for saying that. Definitely don't know if I agree with that necessarily, but great for him to come into the game and have that confidence with his team. And then I think when you take a look at Kentucky in that next game, they blew out Buffalo, took care of business there. Everyone thought this was the Kentucky Invitational. People were calling it that, saying that the Sweet 16, they had maybe the easiest road that anyone had ever seen to get to the Sweet 16, from the Sweet 16 to the Final Four with all these people going down. You take a look at all the seeds in that region of the bracket. You had 11 seed Loyola Chicago, 7 seed Nevada, and a 9 seed in Kansas State. So everyone thought it was going to be just a coast for Kentucky to get to the Final Four. Didn't work out that way. Kansas State obviously played a great game, had a great game plan heading in, and I remember watching the end of the second round game after they beat UMBC. Remember watching that and seeing Barry Brown saying, hey, we'll be ready for him. We know that were coming into this game understanding who Kentucky is. Obviously, a lot of freshmen, a lot of length, a lot of big guys, but they knew that they would be ready, and they did a great job against them, had a great game plan. I was always on Bruce Weber, never thought he was a great coach. At Illinois, he obviously took the Illini to the national championship game, but that was with Bill Self's players. That was with Darren Williams and D. Brown back in the day, '05, and kind of had the program after that. After he took over, the program kind of went like this, downhill a little bit, and he got let go at Illinois. Ended up surfacing at Kansas State after Frank Martin had built them up, and obviously they made the run to the Elite Eight a few years ago. Played against Butler and with I think it was Angel Rodriguez. I think that was the year. Those years when he was there, Kansas State had a lot of good players. Jacob Pullen, I believe, was there on that team, and he played with the Houston Rockets for a little bit in the NBA, I believe. And just think that for Bruce to get back and get his team back in this position, I think is great. And for the first time ever with him as the head coach at Kansas State, I thought maybe a couple years ago he might get fired because I felt like he maybe wasn't doing as good of a job, obviously, as his predecessor had done in Frank Martin and Bob Huggins when Bob Huggins was there at K-State after he left Cincinnati. So I think this program to be back here is absolutely outstanding for them. I think it's going to be great for them next year because they are such a young team, have a lot of sophomores and juniors coming back. It's definitely going to help their confidence a whole lot to be in the Elite Eight, no matter how they got there. I don't think they necessarily, no one ever believed that they would get here at this point. And I think the fact that they're there is absolutely crazy, and I think it's great for the program. And despite the fact that they may be the luckiest team of all time to get there, they really have a chance to go to the Final Four. But I do think in that game it's going to be really tough. I think Loyola Chicago might actually have a better team. I think they have great basketball players, not a lot of great athletes. You look at Clayton Custer, Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year. He played outstanding against Nevada. Did a great job. And they've had people step up, whether it was Towns in the Sweet 16 stepping up. They got a big guy who's really good inside and has the size that can maybe match up with Kansas State because Kansas State is a little bit small, I think, when you look at some teams. And it's just amazing to see those two teams in the Elite Eight and see Kansas State, a team that finished fourth in the Big 12. It was kind of a middle-of-the-pack Big 12 team, was not a great team all season long, but they really have done a great job and won one big game that no one thought that they could win against Kentucky. And now moving on to the Elite Eight. And it's the same thing with Florida State. They beat, obviously, Xavier in the second round, and a lot of people didn't think they could win that game, but their size has been unbelievable, and they played really well in the tournament. I watched them in the ACC tournament, actually, the first round. They got beat by Louisville, and they were absolutely played horrible in that game. Got beat by about 20, or they were down 25. They made a comeback, but absolutely got housed and absolutely dominated in that game. So to see them come back and make this type of run in the tournament has been absolutely amazing, and it's amazing to see. Leonard Hamilton, coach team. Leonard Hamilton doesn't get enough credit for what he's done, but they have a ton of size. They got a ton of athletes. You look at Terrence Mann, who's a good shooting guard on the wing. He drives to the basket really well. A lot of guys inside who can really get it done. I was surprised that they were able to take care of Gonzaga. I thought Gonzaga was a great team all season long. Josh Perkins, I thought they had the tournament experience, Mark Few and company. But Florida State, they just kept making their run, and that's what they did against Xavier as well. They made a late run in that game, and I think Florida State kind of wanted to keep that game against Gonzaga in the half court. And I felt like they made some big plays, made some great defensive plays down the stretch, a lot of big blocks, and hit a few big threes to really stretch the lead and give them the chance to win that game, and they did. And now playing Michigan, I think that's going to be an interesting game as well. I think John Beilein obviously is one of the most underrated coaches in the country, and I think both coaches really are two of the most underrated coaches when you take a look at Hamilton and what Leonard Hamilton's been able to do, obviously at Miami before Florida State, now getting here. Jonathan Isaac, he had a great recruiting class last year, but this year not with a lot of, I mean, he's got talent, but not a lot of big-name talent. He's got guys who can play, certainly, but not a lot of guys who are household names at all by any stretch of the imagination. They finished 8th in the ACC in the regular season, and for them to be in the Elite Eight after finishing 8th in the ACC is completely amazing. I think it's completely crazy, really, and it fits this college basketball season, which has been probably the craziest season we've ever seen, the most parity that we've ever seen. And I think when you take a look at the teams that are in the Elite Eight, Kansas State, Florida State, it's just a lot of teams that you never would have expected, just random teams almost that just came from the middle of the pack in their standings in the conference. Just teams that, they're good teams. They played well in the tournament, but aren't necessarily great teams at all by any stretch. And I think, they've proven that all season long, and it's been proven, I think, this year in the AP Top 25, more Top 25 teams lost to unranked teams this year than in any other year in the history of the poll. So I think that just shows exactly what this year's been all about. I think, when you look at some of the teams left in the tournament, not being in the top 25 poll, I think Loyola, the way that they've done things, they beat Florida earlier in the season, but to have that Sister Jean mojo is amazing. And but they didn't look like a great team. I was watching the Missouri Valley Conference Championship game, and they certainly didn't look like a team that I thought was going to make it to the Elite Eight. I thought they kind of looked slow and didn't have a lot of great athletes. Obviously dominated the Valley, which a lot of credit goes to Porter Moser for doing that and getting this program anywhere near the place that they've been. I mean, the Elite Eight for the first time since the 60s. And even to win the Valley, I think, is a great accomplishment for this program, which was the middle of the pack program in the Horizon League when you had Butler winning the league every year. And this program certainly was not one that you would have expected to make a run in the NCAA tournament or do anything at all in the NCAA tournament. So I think it's been a great Sweet 16, great Elite Eight. Tonight we had Duke beating Syracuse, matchup of two zones there. Obviously, Syracuse's length, they're the tallest team in the country. They had a lot of guys who looked like they were playing well at the end of the year, where you look at Dolezaj, you look at Howard and Battle. Those guys, they really played well in this tournament run, winning 3 games to get to the Sweet 16. You got to give them a lot of credit. Obviously, they beat Arizona State in the first round, beat Jamie Dixon and TCU, which had a great year, lost Jalen Fisher, their point guard, early in the season. But then to win, obviously against them, and then beat Michigan State, which Michigan State played awful in that game. Izzo's got to be really disappointed with his performance. Obviously had a team that he thought probably could have gotten at least to the Final Four, a national championship. They were my national championship pick before the bracket, when the bracket came out actually, and before the tournament started. And so I think obviously this has got to be one of the most disappointing seasons for Tom Izzo, for them to lose. When you take a look at, I think a couple years ago when they lost to Middle Tennessee State, that might be the only season that you could say is more disappointing, or tournament that was more disappointing for them, because I thought this team with Miles Bridges, Jaren Jackson, Cassius Winston, I thought they had a great chance of advancing and doing some things, but they just couldn't make a shot against that Syracuse zone. It's amazing. However many years in a row you see Jim Boeheim, and he's been there for 40-something years, and just, the fact that he's still able to get it done is just quite amazing. And I think the program, for them to get back to the Sweet 16, I think that's a great thing. That's what they are now, basically, is a double-digit seed that makes runs in the tournament. Obviously, they made a run to the Final Four a couple years ago in 2016, and for them to make another run here, it was pretty amazing to see. And actually, that year, they benefited from the Middle Tennessee State win against Michigan State. Middle Tennessee State was a 15 seed, and Michigan State was a 2 back in 2016. And obviously, the second round, Syracuse had to play Middle Tennessee as opposed to playing Michigan State, and obviously benefited quite a lot from that. And they beat Virginia as well, another team that went down early in this year's tournament and choked a little bit. As you could say, Tony Bennett hasn't gotten it done in the tournament for sure. When you take a look at it, great defensive coach, but just hasn't been able to get it done in the tournament. And I think it's the offense. I think it's the fact that they're too slow, too one-dimensional almost. They don't have anything to go to when they get down. They don't have a game plan for that. They haven't really figured that out. They play great defense, and it's worked really well in the regular season. And he's one of the best coaches in the country. There's no question about that. Absolutely one of the best coaches. But what he's been able to do, winning the ACC with the players they had this year, they don't have ACC champion players. When you look at some of these other teams, when you look at North Carolina and Duke, for Virginia to only lose 2 games is amazing. But obviously haven't been able to get it done in the tournament. I thought a few years ago in 2014 they even lost to Michigan State, which was a team when they were the number 1 seed. Michigan State was the 4. Everyone was all over Michigan State that year, but I thought Michigan State was not as good as Virginia that season, and with the players that they had. Actually did have some NBA guys in London Parantes and some guys like that. Justin Anderson, I believe, was on that team. So just haven't been able to get it done in the tournament, and that's happened. Speaking of guys like that, Bill Self has been another guy that hasn't really been able to get it done at times with Kansas, but he did a great job, has done a great job so far this year, beating Seton Hall, which was a good win for Kansas there, good win for the Jayhawks in the second round. And I thought when you take a look at that, this is not the most talented squad that he's had, but they know how to get it done. And I think this is going to be a great game against Duke. I really do. I think that Kansas has, Devonte Graham, maybe potentially National Player of the Year at point guard. LeGerald Vick, obviously, on the wing. As a bouquet down low, I think him being able to play is going to make a big difference against Duke, obviously, with the size. Duke probably has more talent here, and they've played better. But you look at what they did against Syracuse. I mean, you saw them miss a lot of threes, miss a lot of open shots. And if that happens against Kansas, I think the Jayhawks might have what it takes to advance, actually beat them and get to the Final Four, a one seed actually making it to the Final Four, which would be awesome to see this year in this tournament. And I think for Kansas, obviously, they've lost a lot of times early in the tournament or earlier than expected when they've had a lot of great players. I think a lot of disappointment and heartbreak when you look at Bill Self. They've lost to VCU in the Elite Eight, which was ridiculous. Jamie Skeen and company, Joey Rodriguez beating that team. That was completely ridiculous when they had Markieff Morris and all these guys, the Morris twins and company, Tyshawn Taylor. But they've done a nice job every once in a while. Kind of when they're the underdogs, you kind of feel like they do well. And I think they will be the underdog despite being the number one seed against Duke. I think a lot of people believe that Duke has more talent. I think they do when you take a look at Marvin Bagley and Wendell Carter, Grayson Allen, obviously. So they do have a lot of great talent. But Kansas can match up with them. I really believe Kansas is a little bit smaller. Going to have to make shots. LeGerald Vick is going to have to play well. Malik Newman's going to have to play well. But I think Devonte Graham, the way he's played so far in the tournament, has been incredible. I think he's just done a terrific job, and I think he's been one of the best players in the country when you take a look at it, start to finish. He's basically taken that role that Frank Mason, who's now with the Kings, last year's National Player of the Year, and he's basically run with it. And I think he's done a terrific job, basically duplicating what Frank Mason did last year. So I really think I really like the way Kansas has played in this tournament. I think they have a real shot. I think that's going to be a real good game in the Elite Eight. Take a look at the East region now in Boston. Villanova against Texas Tech. Terrific job by Texas Tech. 30 wins for the first time in program history. The Elite Eight for the first time in program history. And Chris Beard, man, he almost took the job at UNLV. I think running Rebels fans are really, really upset that he didn't. He's a heck of a coach, man. You take a look at what he's done. It's been fantastic at Texas Tech, his alma mater. He said that was his dream job. And he's got Keenan Evans playing like a pro, fantastic player. I mean, they just get it done. They kind of remind me of Pittsburgh back in the day with Jamie Dixon, play really great defense and have just enough guys, great guard play to get it done. Against you, have some bigs that can get it done inside, make some shots. But Keenan Evans has been terrific. And this Texas Tech team, I thought they could lose early in this tournament. They almost lost to Stephen F. Austin in the first round, which I would not have been surprised to see that happen. But they've just done a fantastic job since then, beating Purdue. I think Purdue definitely missed Isaac Haas inside. I think there's no question about that. But I really think Texas Tech, the job that they did, you really got to commend them. And first Elite Eight in program history. It's amazing. They were a 3 seed back in 1996, I believe, with Darvin Ham and company. Tony Battie, maybe even back then. He was a high draft pick from Texas Tech. But you take a look at them and what they've done has been absolutely fantastic. And they've done a great job to get to the Elite Eight. And I think Chris Beard really deserves to be commended and maybe National Coach of the Year. I think when you take a look, stepping back after this tournament, if they awarded gave out the awards after the tournament's over, I believe that Chris Beard would have a great chance of winning that National Coach of the Year. I think he won Big 12 Coach of the Year, well deserved, and certainly for Texas Tech to be in this position is unprecedented in their program's history. And then you look at Villanova just getting it done against West Virginia. Obviously, West Virginia's got a lot of excellent players. Kanate inside, Javon Carter, one of the best defenders in the country. I believe he's going to find a place in the NBA because I believe he plays good enough defense. Offensively is not there yet, and I think his jump shot has to improve. I think you take a look, he's a little bit small, but the way he defends is just terrific, and I think he is one of probably the best defensive player in the country, even at his size, which just goes to show you that heart means so much, and Bob Huggins loves that guy. And then I think when you look at Dexter Miles, they were kind of undermanned, and Bob Huggins did a great job all season long. They didn't really have that offensive threat, that go-to guy. They've kind of gone to that press Virginia style versus maybe when they had Deshaun Butler back in the day, had some players who could make plays offensively. And with that West Virginia team that made the Final Four, beat John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins and Kentucky back in 2010. But this team was not like that team. This team was a lot more defensive-oriented, and they had Villanova kind of flummoxed for a while in this game, and I think Villanova had to kind of figure it out. They had to tough it out for sure, and it was fun to watch Jalen Brunson and company get it going. Mikal Bridges has done a great job this season, all season long for them, and this really does kind of remind me of 2 years ago when Villanova won the national championship. I think they have that type of team again. They shoot the three. They're going to be live and die with the three. But I think that they've got enough when you take a look at their talent, their skilled players. I think they have too much for Texas Tech, and I think they'll advance in this game, and I think they'll win by double digits and get back to the Final Four, and that'll be great seeing them against Kansas or Duke. Whoever it is in that Final Four on that side of the bracket is going to be absolutely spectacular. So my Final Four picks, here are the four teams I believe are going to make it out of this Elite Eight and make it to the Final Four there in San Antonio. I think Loyola's got enough. I think they're the better team when you look at them in Kansas State. Kansas State, a middle-of-the-pack team in the Big 12. Been lucky to get here. Barry Brown has done a terrific job. He's a great leader for them. I don't want to take anything away from him. He's done an outstanding job, great guard. I love the way that he motivates his team, getting everybody in the huddle before the game, and he has a great message for them. I think he says before every game, he says, hey, they picked us to finish 8th in the Big 12. I think he gets everybody pumped up, and he did that even during conference games in the Big 12. And certainly now, I think he said, hey, we were ranked number 16 out of 16 teams by some people when they reseeded the field in some of those articles. Kansas State was ranked as the lowest team left in the Sweet 16. So Barry Brown has done a great job of motivating his group there. Bruce Weber, I think, has done a fantastic job of just keeping it going, keeping them playing. They never expected that they'd be here. I mean, they're almost as surprised, I feel like, as Loyola Chicago is. But I just think Loyola Chicago has a little bit better basketball players. When you take a look at their shooting ability, you take a look at some of these guys, like I said before, they're not great athletes, but they're great basketball players, and they've gotten it done. And I really just think there's going to be a mid-major in this Final Four. This tournament has been too crazy to not see something like that happen, and I think the Ramblers are going to march on to the Final Four like VCU did back in the day, like George Mason did back in the day, Butler. I think they're going to be in there in the Final Four. A Missouri Valley Conference team, amazing. Since Wichita State left the conference, they're still going to be nationally relevant because of this team and Sister Jean and company. That's going to be an awesome story. I think she has been the best story of the tournament so far. And I think the fact that they're going to make it back, I think they're going to beat Kansas State. I think they have enough three-point shooting. I think they're going to make it to the Final Four and face off against, I believe it's going to be Michigan. I think Michigan, the way that they played in their game, knocking down so many threes, they did such a great job against Texas A&M, and Texas A&M obviously coming off that North Carolina win when they completely destroyed them, had great guard play in that game. When you look at also inside with Robert Williams and you take a look at Tyler Davis and Kyle Hogue inside, they've been great. But Texas A&M just completely laid an egg, did not play any type of defense at all, didn't even look like they were interested in playing defense in that game against Michigan. A complete embarrassment, and the Wolverines obviously jumped on them from the start and just coasted to the W there. And I think that was a great job by them. Great job by John Beilein and company. And John Beilein, another one of these underrated coaches. Some of these coaches, man, they're going to get their due when you take a look at these two, John Beilein and Leonard Hamilton. Two of the most underrated coaches, I think, in the country. John Beilein obviously took West Virginia to the Elite Eight back in 2005 with that backdoor cutting, Kevin Pittsnoggle hitting threes back in the day. So They've had a lot of Mike Gainsey. I was trying to think of some other names. J.D. Collins from that team. Get at me, Jon Rothstein. What do you know? Come on. You look at West Virginia. I think back then and now Michigan, they play exactly like them, but they have better athletes. When you look at Abdur Rahman, you look at Moritz Wagner inside. He's been a fantastic player. He's going to be a first-round pick in the NBA draft. I think he's going to be a good NBA player, can shoot the three, stretch the floor, has size, athleticism, can block, play defense. He is a great player that people don't know about enough. And I think this team, Jordan Poole, obviously they should have lost to Michigan in the second round. They should have lost that game. We're really lucky, extremely lucky to get to the round of 16, the Sweet 16. But obviously just blitz Texas A&M, and I think beating them in this round, I think they've got a chance. Certainly, I think they have the advantage against Florida State. Florida State obviously has size, but I think the skill will prevail. In that game, I think that Michigan's just too skilled. I think they've got a little bit of an athletic ability to maybe match up with some of the Florida State athletes, whereas Gonzaga maybe was down a little bit. Obviously, they're missing Tilly in that game. Dilly. I always want to say that when I think of him. But, I think Michigan in this game will definitely have a chance to advance. I think they probably are the better team. I think they had a much better regular season. Obviously won the Big Ten tournament, beat Purdue, Michigan State in the Big Ten tournament in New York. Ridiculous that it's in New York, but I think they're going to have a chance to advance in this one. I think they will advance, and I think it's going to be Loyola Chicago, Michigan. I'm taking Kansas in the Kansas-Duke game. I think a lot of people are on the Duke side. I think Duke did not shoot it well in that Elite Eight game. If they get it lulled in to shooting the three, again, against Kansas, I think that could be a problem for them. I think Kansas has athletes on the wing. Malik Newman's going to have to play big. LaGerald Vick is going to have to come up big. Kalena Azubuike is going to have to be big inside. Udoka Azubuike, I think Kalena was from some other team back in the day. But I think Kansas, when you look at it, Mikhailuk, he's going to have a big game. Their guards are going to be the big difference maker in this game and the X factor in this game. And I think the Jayhawks, I think they have what it takes. I think Duke inside, they definitely have the advantage. Hopefully the referees will let them play a little bit, because I think that's going to be a key, usually in a Duke game, especially in an Elite Eight Duke game. They like to blow the whistle a lot and allow the Dukies a chance to get to the free throw line, but don't think that'll happen. So I think the Jayhawks defense will be enough against that 2-3 zone. Duke may have to go man against Kansas, because I think Kansas can shoot the lights out, especially if they're knocking down threes. If you got Mikhailuk knocking down shots, Graham knocking down shots, Vic and company, if they're all knocking them down, I think they're going to have to switch up the defense potentially, and that could cause problems. Kansas is going to have to do a good job on the boards against Duke, because obviously the size down low definitely favors the Blue Devils, but I think the Jayhawks can get it done. And then I think in the other game, as I said earlier, Villanova. So I think it's going to be Villanova, Kansas, Loyola Chicago, and Michigan in the Final Four. Those are my picks. Kels Dayton, RoundballDaily.com. Keep logging on to Roundball Daily for more tournament takes, NBA as well. We've got a lot of great stuff, including do the Sacramento Kings have their core in place on RoundballDaily.com. Take a look at that article. Are they going forward? Finally, the Kings have a chance finally to be better than they've been. Obviously, I haven't made the playoffs since 2006. I think they finally might have their core to get them there with some young players, Bogdanovich, De'Aaron Fox. They maybe have a young group that could get them back into the playoff hunt. But that's on RoundballDaily.com right now. And this has been my NCAA tournament predictions. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll talk to you later. Maybe after the Elite Eight, heading into the Final Four, get some predictions, some previews. Definitely like to break it down there. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Kels Dayton. We'll see you next time.